Fates Warning are a band with a long recording history and recently released their 7th album, Inside Out. The band's last record was Parallels, which was released in 1991. And I asked guitarist Frank Aresti what the band had been up to in the time leading up to the new album.
We put Parallels out, and then we went on a small tour, headlining. And we were supposed to do more touring in the summer, but then we ran into some problems with our record company and just some legal problems. And it seemed as if we didn't have enough support to do exactly what we wanted to do, so we ended up renegotiating. And anyone who's gone through anything legal will know that any legal thing takes a very long time. So we've been doing mostly that. You know, mostly it was a sitting around period, a hiatus, so to speak. And we started writing about maybe a year before we recorded Inside Out. And we went through, then we were also going through some, management difficulties and things like that. So it was basically like a 3-year cleansing period where we just solved everything we needed to solve and went on.
I asked Frank how Inside Out differs from previous Fates albums.
It's kind of a departure from Parallels. It's I think heavier, but in a raw sense, not like in terms of, there's more chunk, it's rawer, more earthy,
Organic.
Sorry?
Organic.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. We definitely wanted to go for that in the production of the record. I know for one, I had the specific idea that I wanted the record to sound like a really good rehearsal sound, a really good live sound, okay? Because I did notice that live, no matter what record we were doing live, it always sounded better live. There was more of the vibe was stronger live than it was on record. And so we wanted to try to capture that on record, that we wanted to try to capture that same live feeling on record. So we went for that cleaner production, not so slick as Parallels. And the music we went for just, again, we were just being ourselves, really. It's not like we had to force ourselves to be heavier or to be this or to be that. We were just ourselves.
Longtime Fates fans will be pleased to know that the older albums are now available stateside for the first time in years. And Frank says it's something the band has hoped would happen for a long time.
Yeah, well, we've been trying to do that forever. I think it was on, let me think what tour it was. Okay, it was when we were in Toronto recording Parallels, which was like, 1990. We found out that Enigma wasn't going to be distributing our records anymore. So what we wanted to do was, since then, Metal Blade's been going through, the legal process of getting another company, getting back the rights to our records and getting another company to distribute them. It's taken this long to do it, we've been trying forever. It was mainly because Enigma went under and took us with them. They didn't bother selling the rights straight away, saying, they didn't bother approaching the label and saying, listen, we're not going to be distributing this anymore, you want to buy the rights to it, or anything like that. They just didn't bother. They just went under and took us with them. So yeah, for the longest time, the only way a person could get a CD or a cassette of any of our past stuff would be if they got lucky, because the record store had some lying around, or because, the shipping companies had some lying around. But now they're all out. We released a couple in July, and then the rest this month. So everything's out there now.
I also talked to Frank about the fact that the lyrical content of Fate's albums seemed to be loosely conceptual, and Frank agreed that on the surface it would seem that way. However, it's not planned that way.
We were bent with Parallels on not making it a conceptual album, even with Perfect Symmetry. Okay, we were like, no, we're not going to do this conceptually. But it just so happens that we all think alike, and while we're doing a record, we're in a certain phase of living, and so of course we're going to write about that. And so it seems like all the songs are tied. It wasn't until late in the making of the record that we noticed that everything was so well tied together. Like, for example, I wrote the lyrics for The Strand, okay? I wasn't very familiar with the lyrics that Jim was doing when I wrote The Strand. I knew a couple of the songs. I knew, like, Pale Fire, and I knew Shelter Me, because we had played them live. Okay, but that was it. When I came up with my ideas on what I wanted to write about, I wrote them, and it was funny when I saw that Jim's lyrics, and when Jim saw that my lyrics were coinciding with each other. We were thinking alike. So then that's why I think, we finally came to the decision of calling the record Inside Out, was because all the lyrics fit in with that concept of living inside out. And it just sort of falls that way. Everything always falls into place that way, you know what I mean? It's very seldom, I think, do we achieve something intentionally, because from the point where we have an idea to the point where it manifests, it always changes. But it always falls into place in a very natural way. The same thing happened with Parallels lyrically, and the same thing happened with Perfect Symmetry. Perfect Symmetry was all about balance in life, and one thing with another, nothing specific, just one thing with another. And Parallels was all about relationships, whether it was between band members, between band and fan, or between man and woman, between friends, or whatever. And then Inside Out was just about this. It was just about that introspection and finding out what you're really about.
And Frank talked about the band's touring plans.
At this point, it looks as if we're going to start off in Europe in November and go until Christmas, and then play the States in the early New Year. Hi, this is Frank Aresti, and you're listening to Mark Skaar on Leaving Skaars radio show on KIOW FM 107.3 Forest City.